franchise secrets, Erik Von Horn.
In this episode of Franchise Secrets, I have Salem Najjar on. He's the CEO of Serve Hospitality Group, which he's 33 years old, owns and operates 21 tropical smoothies plus another brand. He's continuing to grow. They employ over 500 people. Originally a CPA, so by trade CPA, an entrepreneurial CPA. But we got into some really fun things, even just how we found the brand, how he picked Tropical Smoothie. And he really has kind of criteria of 3 things that he looks for. And it starts with the FDD is a large part of that. He started out small and then scaled. So we got into some of those things. Leadership team breakdown. I've always wanted to talk to some of these larger franchisees that have a large leadership team. He has a larger leadership team than most franchisors do by far. So I think franchisors and franchisees will find this interesting. And then we talked about scaling because he's scaled pretty quickly, but he's very intentional on how he scales. And there's some things that broke along the way. He made some bad hiring decisions. He talks about mentors. We talk about cash flow versus enterprise value because you're growing your business. You're always putting money back into it. So how does he see that? We got into all kinds of fun stuff, including like, how's he expanding? How's he growing given the economic climate that we are facing today? So I hope you enjoy this episode with Salem. All right. So I'm here with Salem Najjar. He's a tropical smoothie guy. And you have like one other thing open, right? You got a bunch of tropical smoothies, one other thing open, and you're 33 years old with a pretty stinking big empire. Is that pretty accurate so far?
In more or less words, yep.
Let's dive deeper into that. I guess, first of all, how many people do you have working for you right now?
About 450 employees in the field and like a team of 13, 14 in my executive team.
Perfect. So, and then one other mark against you, well, being young, that's a good thing, but it's a mark against you in business at times. And then you're a CPA, like by trade. So like, most franchisors, when they think of CPA coming in to like be a franchisee, they're thinking that's not going to work. They don't have people skills. They don't have all these things that you need to be to grow a big thing like that. So give us the backstory, man, because that's super impressive what you've built. I think a lot of people that are outside of food don't know what it's like to build a team that big. I've never had a team that big. So I'm excited to get into this with you, but give us the backstory. How did a CPA go to building an empire?
Yeah. So it's actually, I have a very untraditional story. I'm not your typical IRS agent CPA working for a big accounting firm or anything, but so I grew up in a very entrepreneurial environment, and my father owned gas stations and liquor stores. So he taught me a lot about good work ethic and running a business at a very young age. And I grew up in that industry with him, but I was always really good in school and loved numbers. So I felt that going down an accounting route would be the best educational fit for me. And I knew that I would always translate that into anything I did in the future. So I went off and got my education, did the whole CPA route thing. I worked for one of the big 4 accounting firms for a little while. And then that's really where my entrepreneurial journey took off from that point forward on my own without my father's involvement. I opened my own accounting firm. And so that was really my first instance at a very young age of running a company and being my own boss, so to speak.
How old were you then when you started your own accounting firm?
I was about 24. So I was pretty young, just out of finishing with one of the big 4 accounting firms that I was working for. And I just decided to open up a accounting firm and build a book of business and use my tax and accounting knowledge to service a lot of small entrepreneurs. So my niche was focusing on mom and pop business owners and restaurant franchisees. And that was kind of my first way of opening my own business. But I knew that it was either going to take a turn for me investing in other businesses or in building out a larger accounting practice. So as I was doing that, and handling a lot of franchisee work, I really liked the concept of franchises in general. I liked that it was systemized. That was kind of the thing that was missing from my father's convenience store and gas station businesses, the idea of creating, systems and processes that, are really consistent and can be multiplied. So I started looking at franchising more of like as a passive investment at the time. And so peeled through a bunch of franchise disclosure documents, looked at a ton of different brands, eventually came across Tropical Smoothie Cafe. This was probably around 2016 or 15. And then I just made the decision to sign up with them as a multi-unit franchisee. And so I was kind of doing two at the same time. And then I had also just gotten married, and I was working like a crazy amount of hours between running the CPA firm and then trying to open, multi-franchise developments. My wife was like, "You've got an ultimatum here. What are we doing? You're getting rid of one of them. It's either the accounting firm or the franchising." So I kind of decided to blend the best of both worlds and become my own CPA for my own company exclusively, and just focus on, not doing client service anymore, but just really honing in my accounting skill set on my own franchise development.
So let's go back and look at buying a tropical smoothie. So as a CPA, when anybody is has a financial background like that, attorney, CPA, accounting, and they're looking at buying a franchise, most people never buy because they're too analytical to make a decision. Like, that's just what happens out there. But what I'm guessing is, I want to get into, like, as a CPA, how did you buy a franchise? Like, what were the things that you looked at? Because I'm sure there's numbers involved. But also, did you have access to financials of Tropical Smoothie because some of the Tropical Smoothie owners were your franchisees? So did you have like inside access that way because of your profession as a CPA into, QSRs?
You hit the nail on the head. I mean, I was analytical about it, but I also have the entrepreneurial framework that I grew up in that also made me more of a risk taker. So I wasn't just analytical. I did not have any Tropical Smoothie franchise clients, so it wasn't like I had insider access to financials that I was like, wow, this is working really good, I want to go do this. But most of my clients were, in pizza franchises or diner franchises. And so I was really more just attracted to the idea of franchising. So what I did, as I said, I was going through a bunch of different franchise disclosure documents, FDDs, for a bunch of different brands. And that was my way of starting the financial analysis. So in most FDDs, they'll have an item that talks about their average sales, their average profitability. And that was really the starting point.
So that's a starting point. And this is interesting. So this is normal for you, but this is interesting to a lot of people that are buying franchises out there. So I'll kind of pick this apart a little bit. So we're talking about the item 19 in the franchise disclosure documents, where the franchisors can disclose certain financial information. A company like Tropical Smoothie is not an emerging brand. So they can put a lot of financial information in there, and it's less likely to be cherry picked because there's such a large amount of franchisees. So when you were doing that, did you go to like the state of Wisconsin website to be able to pull all these FDDs? Did you start with the FDDs, or did you start the sales process with franchisors and then they sent you an FDD?
Yeah, you're breaking this down the right way. So it doesn't start with financials, right? It starts with, I'll back up even further and kind of give you my thought process that was more intuitive back then, but now it's become like a framework for how I look at brands. So back then I didn't really have it as broken out as I'm about to give it to you, but it boils down to three criteria for me now when I look at franchises. One was the financial aspect, which we're going to get into, right? Does it have good unit economics? The second one was, is it a cultural fit? Do I feel like I like the brand? Does that seem like a good fit for me? Is that a place I'd want to take my family? Is that something I'd be proud working in every day? And then the third one is the leadership team. So, does the people, the executive team behind the franchise or this big company have a strong, united vision? So really that second bucket of, is this a good fit for me, is really where it started, right? So I'm online, I'm looking at Blaze Pizza, Mod Pizza, Menchie's Frozen Yogurt, Chick-fil-A, Culver's. I'm looking at just tons of different brands, and I'm, submitting on their website on the franchising link hey, yeah, I'm interested, send me more information, right? And so I'm getting all these FDDs piling up in my inbox, and then I start picking them apart. So then I start combining criteria 1 with criteria 2, where I'm looking at the financials. I'm starting to see, does this look interesting? Is this intriguing? Is it going to be worth the investment? But also taking into consideration, is this a good cultural fit? Is this something I want to do every day, right? So that was more of how the process worked. And so as I peeled through all those FDDs, Tropical Smoothie seemed like it was the best cultural fit from all the ones that I was looking at. And by the way, at the time, they only had about 300 units nationwide. Today, they're much bigger. They're at like 1,100 units. But when I got in with them, it was much, much smaller brand.
So we'll just kind of fast forward because you looked at a bunch of different things. Where did you buy and how many units did you buy initially? Because a lot of people, they want to go big right away. And I bet you couldn't go big right away. I'm just guessing. You couldn't go big right away. You kind of proved yourself, and then you were able to grow much larger. And you probably made some smarter decisions once you were in on how to grow versus buying a huge area from day one. What do you think? What happened?
Yeah, you're right. I actually don't think that it's smart to go big from day one unless you have a partner or a private equity investor or somebody that's going to give you all the financial resources and administrative resources that you need to really scale it fast. But I did go pretty big for my age and for the way that most people approach franchising. So a lot of people go in with, I'm going to do 1 and see how it goes. I went in doing 6. So I live in the Metro Detroit market, and there was, at the time, they were doing it kind of by cities more than even geographic territories. Now I say it that way because now some of the markets that I'm in are more of like geographic territories. So like when I went into Wisconsin, I did like a whole part of Milwaukee. I did like the entire Madison market, right? Which could end up being anywhere from 4 to 7 stores. It may be 8, maybe 9. But back then it was kind of like cherry picking specific cities. So I lived in the Detroit market, and there was 6 cities that were, of the ones that were available, that were 6 that really stood out to me. And I said, all right, I'll sign up for these 6. So I bought those, and that's kind of where I began the journey.
And then where are you today? Started with 6. How old were you? How long ago was that?
So that was 2015 when I signed up, opened the first one in 2016. So I would have been 26 years old. I am now 33, and we're up to 21 open and operating with like another 25, 30 in development. I mainly operate in 3 states, the Metro Detroit market in Michigan, northern Chicago suburbs in Illinois, and then the Madison and Milwaukee markets in Wisconsin.
How different are those markets?
They're really similar in a lot of ways. I would say that some of the Chicago suburbs that we're in are kind of the more different ones. I think that a lot of the city, even within Metro Detroit, and specific parts of Madison, they can be very different. But I think all in all, the markets that I've chosen to operate in are more of your blue collar Midwest, type of markets. So I think that from a global perspective, they're all pretty similar, but you can find 1 or 2 cities here and there that are maybe a little bit more white collar or more affluent or maybe more liberal, or, so it just depends on where the pin falls.
Is that what you originally thought the good demographic would be when you first started? Or did you think, man, Orange County, Beverly Hills, or very affluent is the place to be? Or, has anything changed from when you were, opening up your first locations to where you are now? Anything kind of solidified in your just vision or what you thought was true?
Yeah, no, I think fortunately, I feel like I had a very good vision of what the brand was and what it stood for. And that ties into that third bucket for me that I mentioned earlier about having the right leadership team, right? So, when I made the decision to pull the trigger and actually invest in those 6 territories, I had met with the CEO at the time and just really grilled the guy on what his vision was for the brand. So I was asking him things like, would you ever, add fresh pressed juices to the menu? Or like I was throwing crazy stuff at him, like, would you ever add, turkey melts or like burgers to the menu. And I was doing all that intentionally because I wanted to see if he would just waver in the face of challenge. And he didn't. He was very clear with what the vision was and what I felt like the vision and the branding was at the time for that brand, which was kind of this eat better, feel better mentality. Not the best, right? So we're not over here on the far right side of the spectrum where, we're drinking lemongrass shots every day, but we're not over here on the other side of the spectrum where we're, eating, double-decker burgers every day. It's like, you can come in and get a 180-calorie smoothie, or if you're coming in with the family and you want to get, a more indulgent peanut butter smoothie, or if you want to get a nice turkey bacon ranch sandwich, like there was a good product mix that I felt appealed to a lot of people. And so when I bought my territories, I was conscious of that, right? I was conscious of the true marketing audience and who the real customer was. And I feel like this particular brand that I'm operating really appeals well to that kind of better type of decision maker, right? Not the best, but not the worst. And, looks for experience, looks for a good atmosphere, looks for something different. And I think that's why it's such a well-received product.
Let's dive into where you are today. 21 open. I'm sure you got a decent amount in development. CPA background. You probably run the business by the numbers. EBITDA is probably pretty important to you. So give us a sense of how you run the team and give us a sense of that leadership stack, like who reports to you and then who reports to them.
I'm based out of Michigan and my corporate office is here too in the Metro Detroit area. So at the office every day, we have about 6 or 7 people that sit in the office with us. And that mainly consists of me as the CEO, my vice president, our controller, my HR administrator, our office manager, and then here and there we have some of the VPs or directors come in from the field that run operations. In Michigan, we have 10 locations. In Illinois, we have 6 today. And then in Wisconsin, we have 5. So, and then we have a few more opening in the next couple months, both in Illinois and Wisconsin. And then, as you said, a lot more in development. The way that the structure really works is kind of, I see you got the traction book behind you there. I'm a big traction guy. So anyone that hasn't heard of that from your viewers, I'm sure they have if they listen to you, but it's a great book. And so we just got done going through EOS. And so I'm kind of the visionary. I'm the guy with 1,000 ideas a day, trying to make them happen, bringing everything to life. My vice president is my integrator. And then kind of under us, we have, the heads of each of our departments. So we've got my controller that runs all the financial department. My VP of operations, who's like my right-hand man, has been with me since day one when I began this whole thing. And him and I are really close with each other. So he runs all operations. And then we've got kind of another seat for administrative, which is my office manager. So everything kind of filters up and down through that. And then, below the VP of operations, there's obviously directors and district managers for the different markets and fields. And then below them are the general managers for all the cafes. But the way that we run the company is really, it is numbers driven, but it's also people driven. So we're very conscious about our culture. When I formed my company, which is now called Serve Hospitality Group, I formed that back in 2019. It was kind of done with a very deliberate intention before I knew about traction or EOS, by the way. So that was just another example of me having good intuition, I guess. But I had a feeling that I need to create a vision that people can believe in. I need to, set some core values. I need to create a mission statement. Kind of all that was in my initial vision. So SERVE actually stands for Strive for Excellence, Elevate Others, Results Driven, Visionary Leadership, and Exceed Expectations. And those 5 core values are kind of our guiding principles into what we do and how we run our company. And so we've always been very focused on being, yes, numbers driven, but also being very people driven and intentional about our culture and just really caring about our people. Because we know if we take care of our employees, they'll take care of the customers.
So Gino's been on the podcast, man.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So did you, so Gino's great. He's the guy that's kind of behind Traction, EOS, Entrepreneur Operating System. And just people who listen to the podcast, they know a bit about that, but I would start with the book Rocket Fuel because it really kind of is an easier breakdown of visionary and integrator. If you're a visionary, that's an easier book to read. If you're not a visionary, you're more of an integrator or operational person, then you'll probably like Traction better. So, so when you first started out being a visionary, were you still operationally minded and really good at operations, or are you like full on visionary where, you know, operations really drag you down?
No, I was both. I'm and I still am, you know, kind of to a fault. You know, I sit in these, part of the EOS model is, you know, you do weekly level 10 meetings and things like that. And during these meetings, you're supposed to kind of let the integrator run, right? I'm supposed to be the guy, come in, give my ideas, share my vision, and let people execute. But I very much have this, you know, to a fault, I still have this tendency to put my hand on the wheel and try to take things in a direction. And that's something that I'm very aware of, fortunately, and I'm very open with on my team about getting better at. But part of that has just been the culmination of us growing so rapidly in a short amount of time, and me always being the main entrepreneur. So I've been both the visionary and the integrator, and now more recently has it switched to me saying, okay, I'm going to bring on an integrator and then bring on the appropriate directors and you know, heads of departments that are going to kind of run the departments the right way and not feel the compulsive need to have my hand in every honeypot, so to speak.
So I'm full visionary. Like I don't enjoy operations like that. Like I would have been out of operations sooner than I should have. You're getting out of operations a little later than you should have. What have you done to be able to kind of mentally flip that switch to be like, I know I need to get out of operations and this is how I'm doing it? I'm guessing your integrator's helping you with that, but there's so many people that are like you that need to have their hands in so many different things, and they really need to pull back so they can scale.
I'll give a shout out and a big credit to my vice president, John, here. I think it's about finding the right person, you know, that makes you feel comfortable. Same thing with my VP of operations, Sal. He's, like I said, he's been with me for 6 years. Those are the two main like integrators in my company that, you know, one of them runs the office, one of them runs the operations. And so I think it comes down to trust, right? So most entrepreneurs, me included, you know, tend to want to do it all, run it all, handle it all of that, right? So you're the visionary and the integrator at the same time. But I knew that wouldn't work for scale. You know, that's what keeps you small. You've got to learn and develop trust. Now, I'm a big believer that I'm never going to let go of 100% of my integrator tendencies, only because I feel that it's important for me to have an understanding of everything going on in my company, not at the granular level, right? But enough to know that, you know, no one can BS me. I don't want to swear on this podcast, but
hey, I've had Robert Kiyosaki on this podcast, and he half of it was him dropping F-bombs. So you're fine.
Well, I don't want, I mean, I don't want to let anybody bullshit me. So I want to be able to know that, you know, if I have an integrator, he is doing a good job. And if I walk into any department at any given time, you know, they're doing a good job. And that's also part of what makes me, you know, a good visionary and a good CEO is, you know, having that personal touch and connection with my departments and my people. So with that said, I think the answer to your question is just having the right person that you can trust, right? So if you know you've got a good business or a good product and you want to spend more time being the visionary on it and expanding it and making it all come to life, then you've got to try to find people, and it's going to be a long process. It's not easy to find good people, especially these days. So you got to find somebody that really jives with you, believes in your vision, believes in what you're building, is more of an entrepreneur, right? Somebody that can really come in and that's a term I love from Patrick Bet-David's book, Your Next 5 Moves.
Great book, by the way. Patrick Bet-David, Your Next 5 Moves is a great book.
Awesome. Yeah. One of my favorites. So, you know, that really put it in perspective for me, the importance of, you know, the entrepreneur, you know, in the company. And some entrepreneurs can make a lot of money. Steve Ballmer, Microsoft, right? Great example of someone that isn't the entrepreneur, didn't take the risks, but was the for sure entrepreneur running the business and got great reward from it. So I think that I've got that in my organization, fortunately, with at least a couple people. And, you know, I plan on taking care of them and growing them with me as I grow. So that's really when I was able to finally flip the switch in my head and say, wow, this is somebody that I can trust and I can feel comfortable letting this part of things go.
Attention franchisors, if you are not bringing in Many of the right franchisees, sales are slow. It's stealing too much of your time as a founder trying to award franchises to the right franchisee. There's a better way to do it. That's why I started the Franchise Sales Mentor. If you want to have access to the information, the techniques, the ways that the best franchise sales organizations are awarding franchisees, then you might want to check out the Franchise Sales Mentor. The reasons that franchisors join is because they want access. They want access to my Rolodex. They want access to my connections. They want access to shortcut both short-term and long-term success to increase enterprise value to their brand.
What are some of the challenges that you've faced growing rapidly like you have?
A lot of changing the process, building a process, changing the process, reevaluating the process. It's just like, it's a never ending battle of just like finding, name what could be done wrong. And, I've probably done it. Right. And that's most entrepreneurs' journey, but that's also part of what makes us entrepreneurs. I could probably sit and study, another larger entrepreneur, all day, every day, but then you never end up pulling the trigger, right? So you got to get to a point where you try to get a good pool of mentors. And I do feel like I have a few that I really appreciate and have given me good guidance over the years. And they've helped prevent me from making some big mistakes, my father being one of them. But at the end of the day, you still do have to pull the trigger and make some mistakes. But rapid growth is going to come with that. You're going to have to put in the long hours and the stressful situations and put out fires, and you're just learning as you go.
Yep. That's just, what about hires? Any bad hires, right person, wrong seat?
Great question. Yeah. Right person, wrong seat. So it's more of the wrong person, wrong seat. Right?
Even better.
Yeah. So it's a lot of like, hiring somebody just based on what's on paper. Just, oh yeah, they look like they've got the right skills for this kind of a job, bring them in, but not having a clear focus on, if they're the right person, and then making sure once you have the right person, then you find the right seat to put them in. I'd rather have the right person all day and I'll find a seat for them. That's why I was never big on titles in the beginning when I was building out my office. 'Cause it was like, it's not about that. Like I could call somebody my, office manager or my marketing manager. I'm more, if that person has got the right, if they're the right person for the job, they've got the right personality, they believe in my core values and my vision, and they're hyped up about it, I'll find out what they're interested in over time, or they might not know, right? They might be young and experimenting, and they might start finding that they like, admin work more than marketing work, for example. And then I might choose to move them over into more of an admin seat. So I believe in building the role around the people and around their strengths.
How would you have built differently?
Definitely some bad hires over the years.
I bet. What would you have built differently? Like, how would you have built something differently? Knowing what you know now, you have 20-something locations. What would you have hired differently, built differently, done differently, scaled a different way, knowing what you know today?
I think the biggest thing that I would have done different, knowing what I know today, is just trying to make sure that I have a solid mentor that's done what I'm trying to do, so that I could learn from them as much as possible, and also try to find ways to, give back to them and not make them feel like, I'm a burden. And also finding the right system that I believe in, right? So we're here talking about traction just because I brought it up, and I love traction and I believe in it. And I think that anyone, who's getting ready to start an entrepreneurial journey, that's a must book to read. But it doesn't mean that that's the only system. I know a lot of other great systems out there that people have used and found success with. I think for me, there was a lot of entrepreneurial passion and drive and work ethic, and all of that was there. But I didn't really have a clear focus as to, okay, here's a methodology of how I'm going to execute, or here's a strategy of how I'm going to approach this at a high level, right? Not super granular and getting into complicated frameworks for how to run every aspect of my business, but more or less just the idea. I mean, you mentioned right person, right seat, just the idea of like, okay, clearly thinking about, okay, what makes me tick, right? What are my values? Because that's when you'll figure out what your core values are, right? And so once you identify those, then it's a lot easier to bring people in for an interview and say, okay, does this person align with those things, right? And if I'm going to be working with them every day, having a clear understanding of who I am and taking more of that self-reflection time to say, okay, if this is what I believe in and this is where I want to go, I've got to share that bigger vision above and beyond money or locations or whatever with the people that I'm interviewing. And they've got to be hyped up about the vision more than anything else.
When people start a franchise or any business, especially if you need to buy a bunch of equipment, trucks or whatever it is, or in your case, sign another lease, buy another building, start another team, there's always cash going out. So you're building cash flow, and then, let's say you're making $1 million a year in cash flow, and then you're spending $800,000 to continue to scale, to continue to grow. How do you balance that? Because your cash flow is just not nearly as high as you continue to expand. You've got cash coming in, but it's going right out to grow the business. So how do you view cash flow versus growing enterprise value? Like having a really large cash reserves versus putting it right back into building something that private equity is probably going to buy at some point.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we're very conscious of cash flow. I'm not, we're not thrifty spenders and we don't waste a lot of money and we're always looking at the bottom line, but it comes down to you got to have a good lender partner or a good financial backing. In the beginning, when I built it all, I did it all myself. I mean, I was the kid that was, skipping prom and working at my dad's liquor store instead. Like I was just hustling from the age of like 10 years old. So I did a lot of grinding. I saved up a lot of money and, it helped me get to where I am today. But it came with its sacrifices, man. It really did. So nowadays it's more like, you prove yourself, you get built out, you get established, and then, the right lending partners will want to partner with you. They'll see what you're doing. They'll see that you've got proof of concept down, that you're making money, you've got a sustainable business, and, they'll want to support you. I've got a lot of, younger people that I mentor, and they're starting with SBA loans, so sometimes you go that route and you get government loans and build it that way, and it helps you get your foot off the ground. So the way to balance it is really just being careful that you're not being frivolous with your spending, that you're being conscious of how much you're building versus how much you're bringing in every year, and having the right lending partners to support you if you are going to overextend yourself a little bit.
So you got lending partners. Do you have any financial partners, investors in the business, or is it just you and your wife?
No. Just trying to keep it, family owned, controlled. And, this way we don't have to answer to a board or, listen to other people tell us what we can and can't do. We're just trying to build it the way that I feel it needs to be built.
Give us the progression of lending. How has your banking relationships changed, and how do you maintain good banking relationships with your lenders?
So it started, like I said, with my first location being self-financed. And then once I self-financed it and it started being profitable, then I went to refinance it with an SBA loan so that I could get my money back out of it. And then I used my money back out of it to open the second location. And then the second location started becoming profitable. And then again, I went back to the SBA to get my money out of it. So I was kind of doing that rinse and repeat process. And I had at one point 5 SBA loans on 5 locations. And then that was when I had a mentor tell me that, with my track record and the way that I was building out the businesses, it would be a good time for me to start looking at a lending partner that would do more conventional lending for me and look at, my whole enterprise and the assets that it had and the cash flow that was coming in, and basically lend off of that. And so after working really hard to talk to a lot of different banking partners and just reaching out to lenders and getting connected with different lenders, I finally found a bank that, gave me a quote more or less on, what the relationship would look like and kind of a term sheet. And so it was really good, and it's been really good to this day. So the time flow there was kind of like 2016 to 2018, all SBAs up to the first 5 locations. 2019 started getting a little bit bigger, looking at the conventional lending, and then, kind of pulled the trigger on that. Might have been tail end of, 2019, right before COVID. But, and then in some ways that scared the lenders a lot. But I think what they realized and what's helped our relationship long-term now is that we performed well during COVID, and, we were so careful with our spending prior to COVID that, we weren't, that we had a healthy balance sheet. And that's what enabled us to, continue to get their vote of confidence during and after that pandemic.
What are the biggest challenges that you see today in the next year? Because we're at this weird place. COVID hit, and that was weird for everybody. A lot of unknowns, and now we're at this place where in the last number of months, the inflation, interest rates have skyrocketed. Housing values are starting to decline. There's could look at being in recession around the corner. So how do you look at the economy kind of macro right now and making decisions moving forward?
Yeah, we're careful. I mean, it's a very layman's term answer, but we're very careful. I mean, I'm not rapidly expanding locations that I'm not sure about. I'm trying to be careful about where we open. I'm not, aggressive to try to be the largest franchisee. I just, we look at ourselves as small but mighty, right? So we're very focused on doing everything intentionally. We're focused on building out a good team and a good culture and giving people the opportunity to really grow in this company so that it's an attractive company for them to work for, and that they realize that they can create a nice career for themselves with us. And I think those are some of the things that will insulate us through these times. But it's definitely not time to just be taking, careless risks or going out and, opening tons of restaurants or tons of businesses for that matter, just because you want to be aggressive. I think you got to be intentional. You got to do your homework. You got to have the right work ethic, the right team, do the right due diligence. So there's a lot that goes into it, but we're going to weather the storm the best way that we know how, and, fight hard and try to be careful and make sure every investment or decision is intentional.
You said something that I think is very wise. A lot of people in franchising think bigger is better, bigger is the best, and that is because a lot of franchisors, that's a metric that they use. We've been talking about on this podcast, 21. If you had 2 locations, you would be on the podcast right now, But you have 20 locations, so that's impressive. But at the same time, you don't need to have 40 or 100. And if you do, you do it at the right time. So give me a little bit more into why you said you don't need to be the biggest, or like, where does that come into? Has that always been that way? And then just give me some insight into your mindset with that.
So, Erik, would you rather do 100 million in sales and make 2% of profit, or 10 million in sales and make 20% profit?
I want more profit, less work.
Right. So it's like, both of them get you the same profit. So it's just, would you rather have the larger enterprise and bigger numbers and more headaches and more people to deal with? I think, I've shifted my focus over, I think it's always kind of been there. I never really felt like I wanted to be the biggest or the best. And so even you just honestly acknowledging the fact that I probably wouldn't be on this podcast if I had, only 2 locations is kind of a shame in some ways. And I don't mean to like pick on you about that, but I just mean that I know some really stellar operators out there that might only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 locations of a restaurant, right? But they might be raking in more money or doing a better job than, people that have a 30-unit enterprise, right? And so, the best company in the world is probably some, small company in mid-America that no one's ever even heard of, And so I think that that's a testament to really think about how we've got to change the conversation to be thinking about, quality over quantity, and we've got to be very intentional about what we're building. And so that's kind of been the theme and the focus for our company is we're really trying to challenge the status quo. And it's not just about, burn and churn, open as many as we can, hire as many employees as we can. It's about trying to be better at what we do, so we can be a standout operator. And so that intuition, that feeling, that virtue that we have is kind of one of the things that guides us into our decision-making process. And so I would rather be remembered for being a stellar operator or a very intentional, wise operator than I would be to just say I have, 100 of these operations and I've just, just becomes a measuring contest.
So when you find the person
that has 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 locations, and you're like, Erik, they are killer at this one thing, and your audience should know this about them, make that introduction to me. We'll get them on the podcast. Because like the way I found you, you're speaking at one of the big conferences, the multi-unit conference, and you're talking about scaling and you're doing these different things. And so that's why you're on. But you're right. There's other people that have things to offer. And we've had some franchise, especially in the mastermind, my franchise mastermind, we have a lot of smaller operators in there, and they're doing some unique things. Maybe they're crushing it with social media or influencer marketing or things like that. So if you have somebody that you think is amazing out there at the thing that they're doing and the audience can learn from it, make that introduction and we'll get them on the podcast for sure.
Well, great.
Any last bits of wisdom or something? Let's talk about culture a little bit, or hiring the right people, because I know that, you're really good at that. So why don't we talk about that a little bit, and then anything else that we should have talked about that we haven't, I want to be able to leave a little bit of time for that. So culture, right people, anything that you think the audience would be able to glean from that.
So we talked a lot about how I think it starts with identifying, what your culture is. And I don't think that needs to be some complicated exercise. I think it's just more about like, what do you feel that you're passionate about? And that takes some self-reflection of just thinking, above and beyond the money or the status, and thinking more about what it is that, excites you or gets you going every day. And then that's kind of the framework for identifying, what your culture is. But I think the important lesson though is that it should never just be a plaque on the wall, right? It should be a really intentional part of who you are. You don't just want to roll out a corporate culture and then throw that poster up on the wall and then start getting branded coffee mugs and branded vests and, give them out to your employees. You want to make it more about like incorporating it into your everyday life, into your everyday conversation, so that it comes through as to like why why you do what you do or why you say what you do. And then over time, that gives you kind of like a stack of undeniable proof that you have credibility, right, for who you are. So like my reason for being on this podcast today is just more of ties in with several of my core values. I'm trying to be a visionary leader. I'm trying to set an example for my team that, if you can be a mentor and you can share knowledge with other people, do it. I'm trying to strive for excellence. That's the first letter. I'm trying to be the best version of myself and challenge myself to do something that I might be not usually comfortable with, So I try to live my own core values every day and incorporate them into my daily conversations with people. And when you make that a habit, it becomes, when you make that part of your everyday conversation, it kind of becomes a habit that gets built into how they think, how they feel, how they want to change the status quo and think about, I want to be, small but mighty too. And I want to, do something impactful so that I can look back on it and say, hey, look what I did here. Look what I was able to accomplish. So, and I think one of the other things that I want to say too, for your listeners is, it's not all about being huge. There's a lot of people that, I used to listen to podcasts or mentors back when I was younger and say, wow, man, they've got 80, McDonald's, or they've got, 100, wax salons or whatever. Like, I want to be like that one day. And so, it could be very intimidating and discouraging at the same time. I think what you've got to do is realize that you can make a huge impact. I mean, one of the guys that I thought of, and one of my mentors is a guy in DC that only owns one location of Tropical Smoothie specifically. And the guy cranks, like he has 5 out of 6 years in a row, like the number one location, the best customer retention, the best customer service. And he's an old Navy SEAL. He's like 70 some years old. And the guy is amazing. And he makes a big splash in his community, right? And that's something for him to be proud of. It's something for his family to be proud of. And so I think people, whether you're an entrepreneur, an intrapreneur, or, an employee at a company learning, you've got to learn that life's a journey and you can take a lot from everything, So I was the person that, in high school, again, very intuitively, I was doing things and volunteering for things that I thought would look good later, when I'm applying to colleges and whatever. But I was always framing things in a way of what's the story that I can tell behind this, right? So if I would volunteer for Habitat for Humanity, it's not because I wanted to go, and I built a house in inner city Flint with some guys. It wasn't because I wanted the skill set of learning how to frame a house, right? That wasn't it. And I was never going to go into construction. But what I could take from that is I could say, on my resume or when I'm talking to, my future Big Four accounting firm is that one of the things that I did without fail is I would always show up. I would always be on time. I would always learn and listen from, and so even though I was going into accounting, which was totally different, they respect and value that. And that's kind of how I try to mentor a lot of our employees today is, we've got kids, especially in the smoothie business, that they might only work for us for a summer, right? But imagine if you could walk away from that summer and go tell your future employer or go tell your family, go tell your spouse, go tell something that you want to be proud of, that like, hey, in the 3 months that I was here, I was able to do A, B, C, and D. Like I learned how to grow catering sales. I learned how to do this. I learned how to do that. Every skill can almost be transferable. And so I think that is an important takeaway for both employees and entrepreneurs to frame how they mentor people.
Dude, that was awesome. I think people are going to really enjoy this podcast. And by the way, I'm just going to say it here on the podcast. Let's get that single unit Navy SEAL owner on the podcast. It sounds like he'd help a lot of people out. I would love that.
Sure.
Hey, thanks for coming on.
Thank you. This was great.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Franchise Secrets Podcast. Whether you're watching or listening, please make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and to whatever channel you're listening on. If you want my help with anything from buying a franchise to franchising your business, please visit franchisesecrets.com.